Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the IIC Festival. And I'm happy to see such a packed house, and I'm happy to see so many men here as well, which is what I always believe in. In fact, when Ambassador Saran said as well, I think it really is about equal participation. And when we look at today at the role of women in the media, and it's really about breaking the frame, women's shifting roles through the years, I think it couldn't have been done without the participation, the involvement, and the empathy of both men and women to each other. So I'm very happy to be chairing this program today. And thank you very much, Ambassador Saran. And thank you so much, Mr. Srivastav, for inviting me to do this. And of course, our very distinguished guests. They don't need any introduction, but I'll give you just a little brief. Of course, Neerja Choudhury, 8 prime ministers, 10 general elections, and many more to go. So I think, not at all. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think reading her column keeps you up to date on all that you need to know on what's happening in India's corridors of power, and more importantly, outside as well. She's the recipient of many awards, including the Chameli Devi Jain Award and many others. Also with me, Malini Parthasarthy, somebody who really has been the chairperson and editor of the distinguished Hindu group. But Malini's heart, as always, is active journalism. She started as a young reporter here in Delhi and then has done much more. She also established the Hindu Center for Public Policy, again, an award-winning journalist. Also here this afternoon is Neerja Choudhury. Sunita, very special because she's a television journalist. She flirted with print, then came to television, was at NDTV with me, and then is back at the Hindustan Times, where she's the chief of the National Bureau. And of course, is also an author. I want to ask how she wrote so many books while having a full-time job, a very difficult one. And now, of course, a Netflix series, Black Warrant, which many of you may have watched. So thank you all for being here. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'd like to start by, I think, asking each of you. And
may I just interrupt and say, please put your mobile telephones on silent.
Yes.
Implore you, please, to do that. It's very impolite when, in the middle of somebody's conversation, the phone starts ringing. So please put your phones on silent. Sorry to interrupt you, Sonia.
Not at all, sir. That's a very... So just to begin, Neerja ji, if... Yeah. Your tea's here, the chai pe charcha. So it's to ask, and given the perspective of the vantage point you've had of Indian journalism and politics, what do you see as the turning point, or what would you identify as the turning point for women in the media?
I was looking back, what I would define as the turning point, I'll give you the story. In 1977 or 78, Kuldeep Nair, who was the editor in The Statesman here in Delhi, had come to Bombay. They were at that time considering starting an edition of The Statesman from Bombay. And he was scouting for people who could join. Now, I had been with Himmat Weekly, which had resisted the emergency, and I was in Bombay with them, and we had a meeting. And Kuldeep Nair said to me that we are looking for people and we're wanting to do this, but we were thinking of getting an undertaking from women we hire that they will stay with us for at least 3 years, because we feel women treat their jobs in the media as a waiting room for marriage. 3 years undertaking to be given by women. In 1982, I was hired by The Statesman in Delhi, and I had a conversation with Mr. C.R. Iraini, who was the proprietor. He did the interview, and he said to me, we are more interested in hiring women than men because we feel they are more hardworking and conscientious. So those 5 years, women had made a mark. And you remember, these are the early pioneers, Usha Rai, Prabhada. There were so many names that you can think of. And since then, of course, women have worked very hard to make their mark. They are now today covering everything: politics, law, space, AI, war. I mean, yesterday night I was listening. I think it was NDTV. This Anjana Shankar, who's at the border of between Pakistan and Afghanistan with the latest trouble, and she's covering from there. Gauri Dwivedi, I think Gauri Dwivedi, NDTV international editor, decoding for us what this new relationship between India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan means. With the foreign minister of Afghanistan being here. So women are now everywhere, have made good and have done very well, and I believe they are going to break many more glass ceilings in the time to come.
Thank you, Neerja. And it's interesting you said that, because I know Malini felt very strongly about that press conference yesterday where women weren't allowed. So it was actually ironic that while we are having this discussion, we still have a situation where some countries are where the Taliban government feels that women journalists should be allowed in. So Malini, you stirred a hornet's nest there, as you're used to doing. But you can start perhaps with what you feel is a turning point, and then tell us a bit about your perspective on this as well.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, what I want to talk about women as journalists, I think we've not really kept pace with development in other sectors. Considering that you had an independent movement and you had women participating quite actively, like Sarojini Naidu, and you had a lot of Vijayalakshmi Pandit, and then you had women prime ministers. In politics, you had more women participating, but very strangely, the whole liberalism that you find in the early Congress movement and what led to independence, I feel that was strangely lacking in journalism. You always felt that newsroom, newspapers then, no television, were fairly close to women, and when people came in, and they maybe 70s, Neerja as a pioneer, I think, and they've been in center better.
You want no, the mic is it here?
Is it working?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. But you can't look up to right.
Maybe we'll...
No, so I'm saying there were very few. You had to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm saying you had very few. Yeah, no, it's okay. You had very few women who could really hold their own, and you had to count them on your fingers. So even us as young reporters coming in the 80s, I know it's been, of course, I need to declare some bias here that I'm a family, coming from a newspaper owning family. So that gives you a certain right which other women don't have. Even I found it a bit difficult to enter the real mainstream. My heart was in politics and my interest was in international affairs and so on. And there was a constant pushback from what is the male establishment of news editors, not just the family patriarchal system, but you had even news editors, pseudo kind of protective, saying, no, don't go there, don't go here, don't go there. Finally, I had a good fortune in Chennai of being there when the whole Sri Lankan Tamil issue broke out. Mm-hmm. So we had a very interesting situation where so many Tamil militant groups were there. So we fortunately was able to get into it, and it was a very inflamed and inflammatory time then. Then coming to Delhi again a very fortunate time where the Congress was under siege from Arvind Nehru and RF and then VP Singh's whole Mandal revolt and then the Mandir. So all this drew us allowed me to get very strongly into political journalism. But I would think the turning point for women has been hard. Women are traditionally asked to cover features, supplements, Sunday magazine, leisure, travel, social issues, mortality and stuff like that. So in my opinion, it's very welcome that nowadays women journalists are, who actually said very well, in the front lines of war, conflict, and in the military, covering hardcore. Many people are even doing proper demographic data, science reporting. And so I think that's a very big turning point. Second thing, the glass ceiling, which I think has not been shattered very easily in India. Unlike the West, where you have people are easily becoming editors or becoming managing editors or even publishers. It's a big, long haul, and you have to overcome tremendous prejudice. And the thing, as I was telling Sonia, women have to work twice as hard as men. You have to write 10 more striking stories than your male colleagues to attract even a public eye. So it looks like women have to work twice as hard as a man to make their mark in journalism, which I think is unfortunate because it's good it's changing today, but the whole thing that women have to work harder to prove their bona fides, to prove their brilliance or their writing skills, I think that's a pity, but we've crossed that hurdle. There's one thing since you talked about Afghanistan, I think we are not. I think yesterday was a jolt. Women journalists need to be more conscious of themselves as a demographic constituency. See, like yesterday, there was not enough. It was like a shock. The entire women diplomats, the journalists, women leaders. You can't imagine Nirmala Sitharaman going a hijab to Kabul. So I'm saying it's a thing like that. It's a bizarre kind of highlighting of where our limits are. So I do think women journalists need to be more conscious of how they shape the political agenda, not just be confined to whatever they are trying to do, or feel thrilled that, oh, we've covered this story and we've got this interview. More important, shape the agenda. What are we covering? How are we covering? Just like on caste and race, I mean, for a long time, South Africa, when it was under apartheid, the US had to listen to Black America. And there was this whole thing about Liberia, and there was a tremendous pushback on normalizing ties with apartheid South Africa. Same thing with caste. But in gender, we don't see that. You don't see women being able to say, okay, enough is enough. You cannot have relations with the Taliban, or you cannot deal with regressive, patriarchal states. And we are not able to do it. We are not able to push back on the actual journalism agenda.
I think that's a very important point also about solidarity, because of course the debate is also whether the male journalists should have attended that press conference, knowing that women were not allowed. So I just want to take some of the points, and I think really to the doyens of the print media, and I just wanted to bring in the television angle, because I'm some years senior to Sunetha, and when we started off in television, it was the first time, and I remember at that time walking into a press conference of a very senior I think a BJP leader at the point, and I was I think 2 minutes late, and I was wearing jeans and boots and a camera person, and the whole press conference stopped. Everybody turned around to say, who is this odd? It was like I was an alien from Mars who had come in to cover this press conference. So I think when young women started breaking barriers, you found that politics and reporting reshaped itself. And I think, at least in television, at that time it was called new media. Now, of course, digital has taken over. I think there was a reshaping of boundaries which was very welcoming. We were very lucky in the NDTV newsroom at that time that we actually, when we were gender neutral, we would say that we would never look at gender. We were gender blind. We actually hired more women than men because they were just better in the interviews and they just did well. So I think those kind of issues were also turning points, and I want to bring Sunetha in on that, because Sunetha, you came in at a different generation when many of the battles had been fought. In a sense, there were giants on whose shoulders that legacy went forward. Yet, there were different challenges.
Thank you, Sonia. And yes, I just want to say that when I entered this industry, turn of the century, so I entered 1999 and I was in Indian Express, before very soon moving to NDTV. At that time, I don't think that we really thought that, oh, is it going to be... I never thought of myself as being a woman in media, because I think I have been lucky that media is a sector where there's like plenty of women, right? And it's not a new thing. I mean, a lot of people think that, oh, you're the political editor of Hindustan Times. Are you like breaking ground? Actually, if you think about it, Kalyani Shankar, years ago, right, was the political editor of Hindustan Times. Much before that. So people have done this. Women have thrived in journalism. So in that way, it's a sector which has a lot of women and has lots of women in leadership positions. I think there was one area about women having top jobs. Now, that is also changing right now because we have 2 women who are editors of broadsheets. Television has always, as Sonia said, it was the revolution because you saw so many women and women were reporting. So TV, but that's the thingy about new media. It had so many women in any case. But newspapers traditionally were led by men. That is now changing. Now you have 2 broadsheets, the Tribune and the New Indian Express, where the top editor is a woman. So obviously things are changing, and that's really really encouraging for women like me to know that there are no kind of boundaries. But let me just tell you about two turning points which I saw as well, even in my career, which seemed that is now enabling younger women. One, I think, is the normalization of work from home. As women, a lot of us are not just taking care of children, we're also taking care of our parents and other things. So a lot of women would before not take up a lot of jobs of responsibility because you won't be there, or you would be away from work for a long time because you would have parent-teacher meetings, or you had hospital visits for your parents or your in-laws, and you had to take care of them. Well, now the normalization which came with COVID, a lot of male colleagues are also taking time out and they're joining their editorial meetings from wherever they are, right? So there's been a normalization of that. It's not just women who need time off to go for their children's activities or responsibilities, but it's men as well who are taking. So there's been a normalization. You don't feel that, look, I can't go to my child's event or their sports day and not do my meeting. You can. And the second thing has been technology. Technology has enabled. This is much more in television than in print. Because before, suppose with TV, the thing was that you had to be in front of the camera. But now with our phones, if we have an iPhone, we can go live from anywhere. You don't need the OB-WAN following you everywhere. And so I see so many of the younger reporters who are coming in, they're able to broadcast from wherever they want. So these two developments that have happened, one, normalization of work from, and that has happened across the world for women. That has really enabled them to be able to juggle their duties, which are non-work related. And of course, you've seen women do various kind of, as Neerja said, you've always, I mean, generations of women have covered foreign affairs and defense. You have so many, I mean, defense is still male dominated, but you have so many women reporters who are covering defense. So one, the whole technological, and with COVID, a lot of people working from home, that has been a shift as well. And I think that has been empowering for women.
In fact, Neerja, I wanted to ask you also about this, that women in media often found a safe space in their newsrooms. Sometimes the challenges came when they actually went out and interacted with a society which may have a different viewpoint or different norms from how they were brought up. So, you would see suddenly women interacting with, say, more patriarchal societies, or women going into a warlike situation, and the worries that was raised also that, that where can you send women reporters? What was the issue of safety? We had this horrific incident when a woman journalist was shot in her car, and then Sheila Dikshit had to announce, almost like curfew kind of things, and transport to drop home. How do women balance that? On the one hand, I think none of us would want to be defined as women journalists, yet gender is part of whom you are. How do we balance that paradox?
Sonia, this is a question I don't have a full answer to. When I came from Bombay to Delhi, you wore sleeveless blouses and saris. Nobody said anything. Nobody thought about it. When I started covering politics here in Delhi, one of the MPs, who I got to know well, and he was one of my sources, he came up to me and said, "Benji, ek cheez ab bura mat manna, aap sleeveless blouses mat pehna karo." Now, I thought about it, and one part of me reacted, who is anybody else to tell me what I should wear? This other half reacted differently. That if I'm making people who are my sources and will give me information and make me a better professional, if I'm making them uncomfortable, if I go into a village setting and I'm dressed in a way that they are not comfortable with, in identifying with me, then why do I have to do it? I can do it at a private function, when I go for a party, or I don't have to do it at the professional level. From that day onwards, I've never worn sleeveless blouses. But because I wanted to be accepted as a professional, more than a woman coming forth and saying, I have my rights, I will do whatever I want, which is also there. So even yesterday's incident of the presser, in the embassy. You know, we are at a very important juncture with our relationship with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You know, so much is at stake. The world order after Trump is changing rapidly. We are navigating a very difficult terrain. So this meeting yesterday with Afghanistan foreign minister is a very important event for us. And yet, I feel somehow it could have been managed better. Because we, when we go to Afghanistan, must respect the way they do things. Absolutely understandable. Similarly, we would like them to respect in India, even though it's in their embassies, our value system and all that what we are wanting. And it's naturally made women journalists very unhappy. I would be very unhappy, kept out of it. Either it could have been managed better. You send the word quietly. All the media organizations, please send your men journalists and reporters. Quietly managed, still different, because of the sensibilities of our guests. But to have women turn up and, observing the dress code, and then to be turned back in a country that calls itself a democracy, I think the whole thing could have been managed better.
So, Rita, go ahead. You want to come?
No, I just wanted to say I found it fascinating what you said about the sleeveless. And I want to tell you that, like, years on, so in my team, I have this young woman who's just graduated from LSR. And she used to wear crop top and jeans. And she was, of course, a new political reporter. And so, Sonia, that balance, like what you asked about, is that as hopefully, a progressive woman, who am I as her boss to tell her what to wear? But as Neerja said, our main job is to make sure that we are able to report and tell stories, right? That's our job. Our job is to make sure that we don't become the story, that we are able to go for an assignment or go wherever and be able to, and be safe. So I remember really struggling and grappling with it. But I just called her and had a chat, and I just said that, it's great, you can wear anything, but do you think that you would get too much attention? And so we don't want to be the story as reporters. So maybe you think about what would be fine, which wouldn't make you the center of. So I don't know how it went down, but it's definitely something we are still kind of negotiating.
So just on that, because again, as editor, and when you're younger, you're a bit harsher. So when I was a bit harsher, and I felt that there should be absolutely no separate allowances for men and women. So if a woman would come to me and say that, I have to do this because of my child, I would say, listen, just sort it out. It's not our problem. It's not the organization's problem. Once I had children, and once I realized that you have to be a realist. So perhaps one way we dealt with it also was that for both men and women, you have to dress professionally. I mean, you can't just wear what you feel like when you're in a professional organization. So even a man should not be wearing shorts if he was going to interview somebody. So I think that was seen as a fair rule when we set up a creche. We made sure that men could also access that creche. So I think when the organization ensures that rules are gender neutral, you will find that there's a much better understanding that comes of it. However, you do have to realize, again, in safety, that if you're sending, say, a 6-foot guy in and perhaps a petite woman into a riots-like situation, you have to realize that extra precautions are needed depending on the person. For example, if a person was, had a learning issue, you would make provision for that. So not that gender is the same, but you have to be a realist on what is best for that situation, but with equal opportunity to all. And I think that's the way we did it. But Malini, go ahead, because you faced this as well. And in fact, when you talked about the Tamil militant issue, I mean, that was again something which must have been fascinating and where this balance must have been crucial. Tell us about that.
No,
so we began, and perhaps we can go back to that as well, looking at how should gender actually play a role. I said that, none of us want to be seen as women journalists, yet how does gender play into our journalism as well, and in the organization, and for women in the media?
Okay. I think that's very interesting. I think when it comes to political journalism, women need to make sure that, first of all, they in my opinion, you need to drop the gender a bit. I mean, if you speak out your gender too much, you suddenly make your thoughts very self-conscious. In my experience in Madras, I was one of the youngest, and a few females really covering the whole Sri Lankan Tamil issue. For me, it was easier because I think I came from Colombia almost immediately. So the sense of circumspection was not there. I didn't have that circumspection that older women might have had. So it is much easier to go there and just straight out speak to the militants. And to the credit, not that we are supporting the Sri Lankan Tamil militants, but they were like sort of like a Marxist groups with socialist kind of leaning. So dress and those countries didn't really matter so much what was being spoken. And so I think in that sense, gender had to be sort of played down.
Not a factor in a sense. Gender wasn't a factor.
It wasn't a factor really. But you had to be very conscious that you couldn't speak it out too long.
Mm-hmm. Neerja, looking at, I mean, we talk about new media, technology, and how it's changing journalism. And in some sense, it seems completely equal opportunity. But we also find that technology can, in a way, stress or focus on the worst kind of biases. So you've seen that with technology and new media, you often find that the kind of online abuse, the kind of online targeting that comes, and this, I think, we faced as women journalists in the online world, that the kind of abuse women journalists get is absolutely unprecedented, and male journalists face nothing of that. This is something perhaps print was a bit protected by, but now it's all no holds barred in a sense, in terms that online abuse is almost acceptable. How do you think young women coming into the profession now can deal with all this?
You know, I often say this, that it's much harder for the younger women today than it was for us. There were different kinds of challenges then, but today everything is more competitive, more complex, pressures are that many more. The role of the media is not defined. You know, younger people often think what they are doing PR maybe is what media is all about. And certainly the kind of abuse that women have had to face, and you know, your tribe, the anchors and all, it's really painful. And it's not only, you know, the abuse, the general tenor of language that is used even at the political level.
Yes.
Is also painful. You know, you can, in the days of old, if you heard parliamentary debates, it was marvelous, the cut and thrust of debate. You went for your opponent all out, but it was very sharply, skillfully done. You know, argument after argument. Today you will say chor hai, uchakka hai, jhoota hai. You know, about people, you know, the Prime Minister, about the leader of the opposition. मतलब कुछ भी नहीं रह गया ना, कुछ भी आँख की शर्म, कुछ भी कहते हैं ना, dignity of words. I find this very, maybe I'm really old school conservative, call it what you will, but I find it very painful, the level of our discourse today. And of course in that, women bear the brunt of it.
Do you find that also, Malini, that journalism today is in some ways much more equal, much more free, but also much more challenging for women who want to join the media today?
Yes, as Neerja was saying, that things have become much more competitive. So I think for young women today to hold their own, exactly what she said, the debates were stronger, the discourse was much more lofty and much more clear-cut. Very much easier for journalists, male or female, to make their mark. I think at that point, in terms of bringing out the story, here I think there's so many pressures, and like you said, many young women are confused, sometimes whether they're with PR or journalism. The media's role has not been fully defined. I think today it's more challenging, much more challenging. There's more equality, yes. Equality in terms of there's less pushback from conservative establishments on how to dress and what to do. First of all, we've all not spoken about it, the big advantage of digital media. So there's a lot of less physical access than before, which makes it much easier for women and men to be genderless, as it were, because it's now much more in digital news. So it's much more scope for ideas as they are.
Mm-hmm. So Neerja, I wanted to get you in on that because journalism in the era of digital age has changed completely. So in one way, you see that politicians, governments, establishments control access much more than they could earlier, where it was, it was much more interaction, physical. You can have a press conference online. So in a way, it also distances you, and it's much harder to be able to tell those stories. How does that work, you think, for people in the media and also for young women negotiating this aspect? I mean, when television came in, I know that at some time we'd interview young people who thought that a modeling background had them to anchor. Journalism was kind of not the main point. How do women journalists today actually find their way?
I think it's so tough because, one, there's a huge premium that is put on your social media presence. I think a lot of people are judged and even valued for hiring if they have a major following. If people are hiring you, they're saying that, are they a voice? Now, in order to get a following, sometimes people get to know, if you just tweet out your articles, you probably won't see that much traction or that many followers, you have to be provocative on social media. So I see
you have to take a side, basically.
Yeah, you have to,
and it has to be like the popular side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I also see women struggling with how much of themselves to put out. Because in this crowd of voices, see, Sonia, when you started, when NDTV was there was only NDTV, and there was Z News, right? And then 2005-07 is when other channels came in. But even so, there were like 4 channels, and so we all had. So as you said, we were the next generation after you guys. But even we kind of made our presence felt because there were like 4 or 5 channels, and if you were okay, you were okay. Now the problem is everybody's a YouTuber, right? And everybody, and people who are non-journalists can say whatever they want to. So they're getting lots of hits. And if you're not in a traditional legacy media like I am, then you can say whatever you want. You can do it on this, you can just go by what's trending right now and do some video on that. And you can get, now Neerja and even I can afford not to pander to that because people kind of know our names, right? And they know our work, so we can write about. So Neerja will, if she writes about politics, all politicians will read that because they want to know what Neerja has written. I happen to know a lot of the MPs. So, we have it. For young women coming in, they'll be like, okay, how do I make my identity? How do I build a following? That becomes really difficult. So I see a lot of people trying to put their own personal information out. They'll put out what they like to do or whatever. And that, for whatever non-journalistic reasons, they gain a ground and then they push the thing. So that becomes really tricky. But how do you make your voice heard? Because, of course, HR is not going to say that. But I've seen them saying that, look, their social media thing, builds their personality, it draws the viewers in, and so they encourage you to have followers. So that becomes tricky.
Neerja, come in on that. Do you think? I mean, I think that's really valid what she's saying. This whole thing of being trending or clickbait.
I know. This is absolutely right. It's a huge dilemma and huge pressures, and as I said earlier, complex situation that you're having to manage. I don't know. That's why when you go to a conference, it's about the media, and people will ask you to media's role, media's not doing. I hate to rubbish working journalists. I hate to say anything against. You attack the business interests if they're not doing what they should be doing. But do not attack the working journalists because you don't know what they're having to put up with and navigate. So that's why I say the present generation's task is much harder than ours was.
Also, and this, I think it's true across generations that when you first came in, this whole thing of, networks and the old boys network, and this would happen whether it was in politics where you'd find that sometimes the male journalists are the ones who would be hanging out and would be getting their stories, and it would happen in newsrooms where the men would go out after work for a drink or anything, and the women had to go home because they had other responsibilities. So that kind of networking is much less now. There's much more equal access, but now there are different issues which are coming up as well. How do you think that actually works? I know women politicians also have often faced this. How would it become that women journalists are not seen as the oddity or the one who's kind of an outsider in a sense to what's the power networks?
I think, it's a very important question because it brings us to the challenges that women journalists face then, face now. Some of them are the same. One is, you have many tasks to perform. You may have a family to look after. It's like walking on a tightrope walk and not falling off it. And I remember when I was bureau chief of the Indian Express, looking after a team of 14, and I have a young child. This was in the 80s. I got a Maruti 800, which I would drive from Saket to Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg for the morning meeting, take the meeting, drive back all the way to Saket because that was the only time I could spend time with my son, young son, come back by 4 o'clock into town for all the press conferences. This was the VP Singh Zamana, 87 to 90, when really I really would have got home before 12, 1, 2 at night. The political developments were taking place at such a rapid rate. Fortunately, I had a husband I would give our child the feed in the morning and wash his nappies and all. We had a paranoia that running water mein karoge to rash nahi hoga, and Arun would do it in the evening. Take care. So we were able to negotiate this. But it is, this task of managing and multitasking, I sometimes feel men really don't know how to multitask. Women do it beautifully. And women also bring an intuitive element into journalism. You asked about gender. Just one, whether you de-genderize the profession. At one level, yes, because today women do everything. You don't say, 2 baj jayega, 3 baj jayega, Kargil jana hai, Afghanistan jana hai, give me this. No. You will do it as well as your male colleague will do. Of course, there is a safety angle that you need transport back home, or even, as you say, dealing with men at it could be late hour, it could be... I remember once... I don't know whether you have the time, a very quick this thing. This was this Kuldeep Singh commission which had gone into phone tapping in R.K. Hegde's government in Karnataka. Hegde was chief minister. And we knew the report was ready. So I thought, let me walk into his house. And I walked into his house and I wanted the report. He saw me and he read out from his report and I took notes and I came back and I listed the story at Express. And they were a bit worried. So the bureau chief said, why don't you think about it for a day or two? I said, no, I'm going to list it. Tomorrow somebody else. You decide what you have to do. And within a couple of hours, the editor walked in and he was carrying with him Hegde's resignation. So the story went on this side and Hegde's resignation on the front page, side by side.
Wow.
But no, wow is later. But at night, I thought, my God, such big thing has happened. Have I got it right? So I couldn't sleep. At 12 o'clock, I rang up this judge again. I thought, have I got this right? I have to get it right if I haven't. So his wife picked up the phone and she's very suspicious. So he came on the line. I said, is this what you told me? Is it right? So he confirmed it. 2 baje mujhe phir itna panic attack tha na. Have I got it right? Have I got this right? So I called him.
He called him again. His wife is really worried now.
2 o'clock. By this time, his wife was really, suspicious. But what I'm saying is women have to navigate certain things which are different from what men have to. There is that added element.
The minefields of multitasking. Would you prefer this one?
Yeah, please.
Okay, yes. Minefields, multitasking. How did you manage?
Well, I don't have children.
So,
That's a major.
What children are the
That's
least
a
of it,
major.
yeah.
I mean, that's a major
Yes.
advantage. Multitasking and what else? I mean, I was singularly focused on what I had to do. So, except that when you are also an administrative role, you have to sacrifice your own writing, your own career, in for the larger good, like you were saying.
No,
No
as editor of the Hindu, the amount of phone calls you must have been getting from
This is better made. And come to your mind.
As editor of the Hindu, the amount of phone calls, the amount of pressure. I mean, the Hindu is one of the most influential newspapers in the country. How did you deal with that?
I think the good thing is that you learn to dodge calls to begin with. You learn to segregate the important one to the non-important one. And of course you do make sure that you have a strong news bureaus and people that are doing the work for the paper, and you don't hog the limelight. Like, take a lot of male superstar journalists, I won't name them, they tend to try to hog all the stories. So I think a good journalist or editor tries to delegate as much as possible. Try to build up media stars rather than taking the whole thing on themselves.
How did you deal with pressure which would come from, say, if you got a call from a chief minister saying drop the story, or if you got a call from, you did?
Yeah, we had, for instance, in Tamil Nadu, we faced that quite a lot. Because very often, politicians in India, I think everywhere, whether it's the BJP or even regional parties or the Congress, they all tend to think, see, my belief right at the beginning was it's a good idea to have friendship. That's with people, with politicians, meet them on a regular basis, have conversations with them, but at the same time maintain a certain distance, not obviously by not asking for favors or not, trying to cut corners anywhere. Be fair to the story first. As a newspaper person, we faced that I faced it quite particularly with Jayalalitha, who really took every single story personally. Because I'd done a news report on, then the PMK was just a young offshoot of the Dravidian movement, and Jayalalitha was very anti-LTE, and she was really carrying on the crusade against the Sri Lankan Prabhakaran and so on. Suddenly she made a deal with the PMK just before an election. And I remember writing a piece on this, and she called me directly and indignantly and said, how could you do this to me? How could you just say such thing? So I think people take it very personally, so you lose friendship as well. But I think we managed fairly to.
That's fascinating. She said, how could you do this to me? What was it like covering Jayalalitha? Because in a sense, she was also a woman chief minister, completely isolated in a very, very male-dominated Tamil Nadu political setup. So maybe she felt that as a woman editor, you would understand. What was it like for you covering Jayalalitha?
I don't know how many of you know, but we were arrested ultimately. Ravi and the editor, me, and we actually were arrested by Jayalalitha. And the first one was for me. Because she felt that as a female friend, I had betrayed her the most. She had come to my house, she had had dinner, and she had shared her most intimate feelings. But at the end of the day, it was just a simple editorial on the privilege motion that she had admitted against the opposition and against the media, for which we criticized. So it just made her very angry, and she immediately sent a privilege arresting. Had the judicial arrest. So I think she took it very personally, you're quite right. If female journalists who thought were friends, not just me, many other journalists before women had become her friends and lost their friendship. And I think she took it very personally. It was very difficult, but she was also very endearing, and she was also a very complex character. Would have been beautiful to, capture some of the moments.
Sunita, comment on that, because sometimes there is this belief that a woman journalist will be softer, will be more understanding. They're not the ones who will give you the big headlines or the news breaks in a sense. I mean, of course, we've seen that disproved many times, but there is this kind of expectation. Do you find that as well?
I don't know whether they expect it from me, but I do I do understand, like, a lot of people, I'm not going to take names over here because, they're all very well-known politicians and MPs. And you can see how there's so much attention on them because they're provocative, right? And I feel that I give them a longer rope. Like, first of all, I'm more interested. Like, for example, who wouldn't be more interested in Ikra? Right, the Samajwadi Party, young MP who's from London School of Economics, I think she's from, and yet she represents Kerala and whatever. So I think what I'm guilty of is perhaps focusing a lot more on those stories, the interesting women,
the human aspect.
Yeah, interesting women speakers and all of that. And then also you can see it becomes very obvious that, when you have those because Parliament has become so contentious now, you can see how a lot of the male male MPs gang up on women. And in every party, whether it's the Trinamool Congress or the BJP, you can see how things are happening. So I think as women journalists, and I don't think it's because, it's just that you can see that women have to fight harder and like they have to scratch their way through to kind of rise. And you can, perhaps that understanding is there. And so I don't focus on, I mean, I wouldn't be listening to women, my male sources, and making up my mind about the women MPs, for example, which I think my male colleagues perhaps would. I wouldn't do that, yeah.
A final round of questions. I thought we'll take some questions from the audience as well who are here. Neerja, often the biggest learnings have come from the most difficult stories and the biggest challenges. What do you think, with these decades of experience at 10 general elections, what has been your biggest learning as you go forward?
I think at the personal level, that credibility is the most prized possession of any journalist. People ask nowadays, that wasn't the case earlier, not what the story is, but who has written it. So that to me is the most precious thing, and as I say, to be prized. What has been very fascinating as a journalist is to discover India and the diversity of India. And my son keeps saying, "Ma, chill out, chill out." And I said, when I hit the road and now Bihar elections are around the corner, that's the biggest chill out for me. It is, you meet people, the turn of phrase is different, the jugaad element. As I keep saying, it's a complete nautanki, Indian politics, and the diversity of India, incredible diversity of India. And how we preserve that in a democratic setup, I think that is our biggest challenge.
Malini, the same question to you.
I think for me the biggest learning has been that whether you like it or not, gender comes into your experience. When I started as a young reporter, I was hopeful, having returned from the US, and hopeful that gender didn't make a difference. Of course, there were those barriers, but they were overcome. And I used to try as much as possible to play down the whole gender perspective. I used to try to say that, let's not think about how a woman covers it or a man. It doesn't make a difference. But through the years, as one has gone, I think for me now it must be more than 40 years. I think it's a painful fact that gender does matter. But all said and done, you do have to prove yourself, like you were just saying. Women have to prove themselves much more than men. Especially in political writing. And there's also a lot of skepticism when women have good sources. There's also a lot of attempt to put down people and try to, you're forced to constantly be on your toes and constantly prove that you can shine and you can really produce original and credible stories. So I think for me the lesson has been, like it or not, gender as much as any other attribute has been a problem or a challenge, and we need to work it into our subconscious, become less embarrassed about it as journalists, and try to convert it into a demographic constituency where we can start thinking about moving forward to shaping the agenda. Like say in Afghanistan, it was a good wake-up call, not just Afghanistan, but many, many other issues where I think women's issues have been really political issues, but brushed under the carpet. And none of us have really had the courage to speak up and say, no, we need this address first before you do anything. I think it applies to politicians, it applies to diplomats, it applies to journalists. As a public constituency, we need to be more active, less self-conscious about being a female gender, allow it to speak as part of our experience.
That's an important point you made, Malini, about gender being a factor. Did you ever find yourself in a situation where you thought someone had crossed the line, or you felt unsafe or in danger because you're a woman, or you felt harassed?
I felt patronized more than harassed. I've also felt that a lot of, as an editor, I faced a lot of problems. A lot of male colleagues would be less willing to accept all, I think, instructions or guidance from us than from my male colleagues. other male editors. I felt a female editor had to go through more. And you had to be more anxious and you had to be more explanatory than a normal male editor would have to be.
Sunetra, what about you? Because in fact, one thing we did that, I remember Sunetra covered the whole of India in a van. I said, you and Nagma, I think, went all across India, which is the first book, breaking news. But did you feel at a time that, that ever physically unsafe? Did you feel that people had crossed the line with you because you're a woman? Did you ever feel that, this is, as a profession, it's unsafe?
No, as I think that anyone who has negotiated public transport in Delhi, and we all have, so then that's when you felt. So not in journalism, it's nothing new, it's just like negotiating. And of course, but the two learnings which I want to talk about, Sonia, is very quickly is, first of all, I have learned that because, as I was saying, so many women have done it before us. So most important learning is, if you don't know something and if you want to know how to handle this, just look for someone who's been there, done that. There are lots of, I know now to call Neerja all the time. And I remember when I was, I married someone at work. So I remember, in fact, reaching out to Jyoti Malhotra and saying that, so she was like, fine, So one big learning is that women have been doing this for a long time. So never should you feel that, oh, how will this, especially I remember, Sonia, you were a boss, so I wouldn't talk to you, but Manvi, no, but you don't go to your boss for advice. But I remember,
I was a nice boss.
Yes, of course. But Manvi gave me the best advice when I had a child. Manvi told me, look, you can be a good mother, be a good worker, be a good wife, be a good... one other thing she said, be a good daughter. But you can't be all four. You can be two. So you decide. Do you want to be a good mother, good wife, good mother, good daughter, good mother, good home, whatever. And I thought it was brilliant. She goes, two things you decide. And so my point is, find someone that you like who's done that and just talk to them. Because there will be people and it becomes easier. So that was my first learning. The second learning was that when I was very young, I used to get very upset about the fact that whenever I did a good story or I did some good thing, or even when I got a promotion, I would hear that some male colleagues have said, or if I got a good story, they would say, she smiled at that person and so that's why she got it. They fancy her, that man likes her, so that's why they give that story. Okay, and it would make me so angry. Oh, that editor likes her, that's why she got promoted. That one, everything was, apart from my journalism, it was the way I looked, the way I smiled, whatever. So it used to make me very angry. As a grown-up person, I feel, well, if that's what works, if I can smile at someone and get a story, why not? Right? If someone just wants to meet me and get a story, why not? Men have gone out drinking and got a thing, they go out for... So if this is my superpower, I'm going to use it. So I tell young women, of course, whatever. And actually my husband was, he says, yeah, sure, if that person likes you. So that is my point. I go easy on myself. If someone is giving me a story, if I'm getting more insight on a thing because of the way I look, fine. Men have used what they have all their lives. So why not?
And I think that's a good note to open this up to questions. I'm sure many of you have. So one at a time. And as it can, well, should we say ladies first or questions? Go ahead and then you, sir, and then.
Believe me, I've heard all of you, but believe me, I felt a morning I read the headlines that women were not allowed at the conference. I was considering it as an affront to the womankind. This country believes in equality of the sexes. We should have laid down our policy that in our country, this will not be doing, otherwise you go back. Because I remember President Sarkozy had come with his partner in life, and our Indian government, then non-BJP government, had said, no way, we cannot have a non-wife accompanying you. So Mr. Sarkozy, President Sarkozy from France, wasn't allowed to bring his consort. So I think that government was so correct. They didn't mind whether France gave up their friendship with us. And now we shouldn't care whether Afghanistan does friendship with us, because we should have laid down our policy straight away that our journalist women will be allowed. I think you people should take a thing to the Prime Minister when he says equality of the sexes. This is not on. It's not on.
I think that balance between also what Neerja said, that of course the stakes are very high, but what Malini said, that perhaps one could have been that don't have the press conference. The visit could have gone ahead without a press conference, so I don't know why there was actually a press conference at all. It was discriminated against. But that point is well taken, Mr. Srivastava. Why don't you go ahead and then I'll come there.
I have 3 very short questions. Anyone if you can answer. First, I refer to the conversation with Neerja had with Kuldeep Nair. My question is that marriage, has it put any kind of impediment on your journalistic career? Number one. My second question is that media has always been owned by the business houses. And the present situation is also no different. Do you find any kind of attitudinal change, from at the end of the owners towards the journalists, particularly women journalists? And did you face any time any kind of gender bias? And my last short question is that trolling on the social media has become an order of the day, and women journalists are more prone to trolling. How do you combat with that?
So, should we have each of you answer one, or how do we do it? Why don't you start?
You want to answer?
You can start with the marriage being an impediment one.
Marriage, it is not an impediment. As I said, I was very lucky to have a partner who shared, child rearing as well as housework, as well as taking care of the technical things even more than I am able to do. So, and encouragement that my profession was as important as his. So that way I was very lucky, and I often say this, it is often said that behind every successful man is a woman, but behind every woman who does something worthwhile is also an understanding man. It makes life easier. Not that women can't do it without it. They are doing without it also. So, but it does mean, the work burden, yes. I remember, I told you back and forth when our child was young, driving back and forth and then being late. Or घर में जब जाती थी, suppose it's 11 o'clock or 10, not 11 is too late, say 10 o'clock. And I'm giving a lift to a colleague who's also going to Saket. And that colleague is talking to another colleague. Last minute, at the end of the day, chatting away. And I get so, edgy, because I knew those 15 minutes will allow me time with my child before he went to bed, or rob me of that time. So my cordiality and wanting to do the best for my colleague versus this was all the time. So those kind of issues would come up. But the other part, whether gender bias, somewhere, yes, even in the best of media groups, and I identified much more with the Indian Express than other, though I worked with the Times, ET, and Statesman also. And from a very early time, Indian Express newsroom was full of women, So they encouraged that. And yet I feel, kahin na kahin dimag mein ye hota hai na, कि will she be able to do what is expected of that job because of her family responsibility? This is unstated. And I also feel sometimes I ask myself this question. Multitasking, able to do professionally, compete with others, stay a step ahead of others, be, as you say, a good wife, a good mother, a good sister, the larger family, do your duties as you are expected to do and you believe in doing. Does it take away from excellence which you may be capable of? You do it well, but does it take away somewhere from reaching that point, which suppose you didn't have to do all this multitasking, you may be able to strike those notes. I don't know, it's been a question mark. Did you ask anything else? Or
I think we'll take as adding on that also about that. I think it's right, because aren't men meant to multitask as well? So they're
meant to, but they do it much less. And somewhere I feel they, to have 4 balls in the air and catch them all is something that prefer to, throw one ball, catch it, then throw another, catch it.
I think men don't ask themselves so many questions. I think they do. It's not that they are more focused. In fact, we know women are more focused, but I think they don't have the self-doubt that we do. And I think about trolling, just because we face it a lot, I think at some point, I remember that Natwar Singh told Shashi Tharoor that you join politics, you have to get yourself a rhinoceros skin suit stitched. I think women journalists have to do that as well. The best thing to do to a troll is ignore them. And I think marriage is a super plus. At least I've been lucky as well as Neerja for our careers. It's very hard to do it on your own. It's actually such a tough job. So it's wonderful to have a husband, understanding mother-in-law, mother, and the whole larger family. It takes a village. But I think you have a question, and you, so go ahead first, sir, and then after that you. Go ahead.
My name is Arun Kumar Das. I am a working journalist. It is question to Sonia. I think women are thriving in this journalism. But what I found, I have worked in Statesman, Times of India, last PTI, that women's worst enemies are women only. Some of the women bosses, they inflict pain and atrocities to their colleagues, immediate colleagues who happen to women. How you have to respond?
I think it's hard to generalize and say male bosses versus women bosses. I've seen male bosses who are terrible and women bosses who are. I think often, I would say that I think women bosses can be more empathetic, but I think they can be extremely tough. And the reason they are is because they have set those same standards for themselves. I mean, I think you have to realize that when a woman becomes a boss, it's not been a very easy journey. It has been a journey where she's faced some struggle, has faced some issues, faced many challenges herself. So when she is a boss, I think patience for excuses may not be very much, but I do think that women bosses are extremely empathetic. I had an extremely empathetic woman boss, and I think...
But there are cases, and there is no dearth of cases where they have been inflicted,
I think women and men, you'll find that it can happen. I don't think that you can say that women bosses are more than men or other ways, but I don't think there should be this automatic belief that because you're a woman,
to their female colleague only.
I know.
That's what I'm saying.
I said I've had very good women bosses. I have been a woman boss. I hope I was fair. I think the main thing you can expect from bosses, male or female, is being fair, being empathetic, of course, but I think to be fair and not also, because you do have to realize that the balance is a tough one. If you feel that you are giving this person a concession, another person will then be done. I don't think we can get to examples here because it's something we can talk about it later.
Sure.
But go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, after that we'll come here. Yeah.
We have many parties, many political peoples from different areas. So I want to know how these different parties like Congress, BJP, Samajwadi, they behaved with women journalists, how their culture is different from each other's.
Malini, do different political parties have a different culture in dealing with women journalists? Like is the BJP, Congress, Trinamool, BJD, DMK?
I wouldn't put it in parties. Different parties in that. I think parties in bed, they're elderly or they're younger or what. I don't think I wouldn't ascribe any particular gender profile to any party. Because whether it's the BJP or whether it's the Congress, it's the outlook. So I'm saying just because Sonia Gandhi is leader of Congress, that means all Congress people are going to be progressive. Or BJP has in case, like the old days, Mulimano or Joshi or somebody, that the entire BJP is going to be another particular way. I think the architects may be wrong. I mean, I wouldn't ascribe a particular gender standardized outlook to political party.
Come, go ahead. So all three. So we'll start with you there. Yeah.
I'm a journalist. Started with Statesman, Hindustan Times, PTI, Doordarshan. And now I run a think tank of my own. So, Neerja, when you said the sleeveless blouse, I learnt my lesson also in journalism very fast. Straight out of college, in my jeans, into the office. And that is where I found that my brain didn't matter. It was my looks which were the talking point. So I learned subdue colors, wear something very dull and drab, have no jewelry, have no makeup, and let your work speak. So that I totally agree, particularly in Delhi. By Bombay, I cannot say. Sunitra, you mentioned NDTV was the only television. No, we were much before them. In 1987, it was Doordarshan, out of which Star was born, and then NDTV came out. So I joined Doordarshan in 87, but I was working for television from 81. We used to have the Upgrah satellite came, and that is where the news came. We used to record in those spools, send them by air to 5 states, the Apple experiment, and that is where I started my journalistic career. Now, how did the glass ceiling break? I was one of the first journalists who came into television. I was in PTI at that point of time. PTI television had started, but they wouldn't give me a break. Why? Because of your safety, we cannot send you out in the field. I said, don't be concerned about my safety. Get me an insurance and I'm ready to go. So my first break came, there was an SYL canal, the Satluj Yamuna Link Canal, Punjab, Haryana, water issue. I get an invite from the editor and he says, immediately you have to leave. I said, where do I have to leave? They said, you have to go for this. You've been asking for assignments. I said, suddenly what has changed that you want me to do a field assignment? They said, because you can understand both the languages, both Haryani and Punjabi. But what I learned was it wasn't the magnanimity because I knew the language, because none of the male colleagues were ready to go. Punjab, militancy was at the height. There was nobody on the road post sundown. So I said, all right, I'll go. I mean, it's a challenge, I'll do it. But few things I want. I'm not going to take an ambassador which is going to stop anywhere on the road without any notice. I said, I want a decent car and let it be air conditioned because it was 52 degrees. I can only perform if I am comfortable.
Right.
I said, where do I go? Where do I start? No instructions. Oh, you start, you go to Chandigarh and you'll find out. Anyway, it was a challenge for me. 7 days were given to me to produce a documentary which the PMO wanted, and it was done. It was highly appreciated.
Fantastic.
And trolling was different kind of a trolling then. Again, similarly, I just come to the office and looked around who can go. Merit rights. So they said, all right, Poonam, you want to go? You want to do field duty? I said, yes. So you go. The choice was that day, it was a Saturday, and I had an event in the evening, so I was dolled up for the evening event. Orange sari with I still remember the color. I mean, Amita Malik wrote a stinker on that, but not on my story. She could not say anything negative about my story, but she says, look at these bright-eyed, dolls of PTI, So a bullet went above my head. Those were the merit rights, but we did it. I was standing there. I did my piece to camera, facing the camera. The mob was there. So, we have all done it. Yes, the biases are there. By word of mouth, they will start the slander campaign against you. One of you very rightly said. But yes, we all have done it.
No, it's wonderful to hear. And I think really we four represent the millions of others, women who have done as much more and much more. So it's fascinating to hear your story.
So I started with a newspaper, with a feature agency, with the news agency, went on to television, and I work only on the social media.
Fantastic. Go ahead. You had a question.
Thanks for this panel discussion. It's very interesting to know more about how women in the media, especially leadership positions, have navigated their journey. My question, and I'm also a young journalist, I worked for the Indian Express and then in the US for a bit. My question is regarding gender pay parity. There are various reports that come out, usually due to union efforts, about how there's a huge gender pay parity in various media organizations, not just in, I don't know much about India, but definitely in the United States, there is a huge difference between how men and women are paid, and it's a significant one. I wanted to know more because you're in leadership positions, how is it in like the Indian media universe? Like, do you see gender pay parity? Have you been paid less than a man doing similar job? What has your experience been?
Malini, do you want to answer that as the chairperson editor?
I think there is gender parity from as long as I know. And I just think it's more like evaluating somebody's own experience, qualifications, time on the ground. I don't think there's a disparity in gender payments in the newsroom.
But I do think that men are better at using offers and getting counter offers and negotiating the thing. I think women have to learn to do that much better. Yeah, negotiating better deals for themselves. Go ahead.
Hi. My question was also similar, what is about, are women getting paid equally? And the other, what are the maternity benefits now? Because, I think that was one of the reasons that someone who's been in the media landscape for the past more than 25 years, I can see that I think having so many women journalists on television channels is really normalized having women journalists. And I mean, you can see it in all the Bollywood films also. I think the recent hit Sayyara also, the main theme. But I think maternity benefits will also, are they still totally absent? Because in my time, they were totally absent. There was no paternity benefits at all. So,
well, I have 3 kids, so
maternity.
Yeah,
maternity.
I said no. I have 3 children, so the maternity benefits are quite good. No, so NDTV
across the sector. Yeah,
no,
but that's good to know.
No, but NDTV began as an outlier, but I'm very happy to say that. In fact, our creche was set up because I was the first. We were a young group, so I was the first one to have a baby. So the creche was set up for one child, my child, and it became then a creche for all the kids. So I think now it's law, and it's actually, I think, pretty good. It's 6 months paid leave, which is extendable up to a year, at least in most television things, it is that. Plus, you have a creche now in every TV organization.
That will, I think, encourage.
So it actually is very good as far as I know. I think last question then, because I think we have to wrap up. Okay, last 2, and then we have to wrap up. So go ahead.
I'm K.K. Choudhury, an engineer by profession. Neerja ji mentioned about editing element. Neerja ji mentioned about editing element.
Editing.
Kind of critical thinking. Critical thinking, which I understand, women are naturally more empowered to fine tune it more than men do. So my question is, what you feel, what the journalist bodies feel about the onslaught of ChatGPT and AI to negatively impact this woman journalist's critical thinking.
That's a very important question. How is AI going to affect journalism? And it's going to affect all of us. One of the editors recently said, we have 300 people with AI now. We are going to need only 4 or 5. What happens to all these people? And how do we meet this challenge? How do we familiarize ourselves with the opportunities that AI presents to us? I think this is an area where we need to give much more thought than the organizations are doing at the moment. Now, I tried, ChatGPT. I thought, I've done this book, How Prime Ministers Decide. I said, let me go and ask for information, see what AI tells me, the ChatGPT. I use the free one, I believe that where you pay is much better. And I got information partly wrong, partly right. And in the way it is given, it was as if a bureaucrat had written, something very mechanically. There was no feeling, there was no sentiment, there was no emotion. And somewhere I felt, yes, AI will go up to a point, but beyond that, it will still require a creativity, a humanity,
and critical thinking.
Absolutely. And critical thinking. Of course, critical thinking, people say who study AI and that they will now think for you. But that element, I think there'll be human beings, men and women, who will be required to put in. But today, if I was to say what is the biggest challenge for our society, I would say AI and thinking about how it's going to reorder our life.
But I also think that it can be a very useful aid. I'll give you 2 examples. One, I do explanatory videos in English. And as you know, English, the reach in videos is very limited. I haven't been, well, a lot of people suggest that I do my videos in Hindi, but I don't feel that comfortable writing in Hindi. AI has totally changed that. I just write my script in English. If I put it into ChatGPT, it gives me a fantastic, because it's my word, it's just translating. So I get a very good script, which I can just read. And I'd be able to really, I haven't done it yet, but it's a good way that I become also a Hindi anchor and reach an entirely different audience. So that's fantastic, which we should all do. And second, a lot of people who were in print, who were limited, they're great reporters, but they're limited by their language skills and they couldn't write very good copy. Now they put in all there's no shame in that, because basically they're reporters, they've gone and done the reporting, but they use ChatGPT to fix and, bring finesse to their final product. And so they're using it to their advantage, and I think that's very empowering as well.
Okay, final question. Go ahead.
Thank you for a very lively panel. I'm a journalist too and a co-founder of People's Archive of Rural India. My question to all the panelists would be,
That's great work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
since all of you have spent a considerable amount of time in the media through the decades, all of that, and you must be meeting a lot of young people. My question is, how do you, of course, because we're talking about women journalists, so how would you inspire women journalists today when they enter the profession, and what is the one or two bits of advice that you would give them in today's times?
Inspires a very lofty word.
Inspire and advise.
Malini, don't look like that. I said inspire is a lofty word, but I do have to say that being a journalist was the biggest privilege of my life, and I loved every day I did it. And I think if I can communicate or pass that passion on for it, I think that perhaps is the best inspiration, I guess. And one thing I would say is never do it for the money. When I started, it was 2,500 rupees. My kids don't believe today that anybody could work for that amount of money. But really, it was at that time work-life balance. How much you were getting paid wasn't relevant because you felt you were doing what you loved. And I think that's the message, I think, across professions, that we do what you love. It's not a job. But Malini, Neerja?
I honestly feel this. I feel that I have a lot to learn from the younger journalists who are in the field today. And I'm saying it this is truthfully saying it. What I can pass on to you is an era gone by. It's very different, your challenges and our challenges together. And you are out there in the field, you are coping with those challenges. How are you doing it? I always find it very fascinating to talk to younger journalists. So, the inspiration comes from you. I don't know how much comes from us, but certainly that inspiration comes from you.
Lovely to hear that. Malini, do you want to inspire? No? So I lost Rani, come on.
I want to sound a bit of a cautionary note. I think journalism going through a credibility test or crisis of sort now, because we have under tremendous pressure from politicians. And I think there's a lot of cynicism, not just about journalism, but on political discourse. I think Sonia will bear me out on that. A lot of cynicism on political theory and why we are not able to understand why certain developments are happening. So I think journalists are also a victim right now of the credibility crisis that is, I think, permeating the whole, academic or social environment. And I think it's become very difficult to even see journalism as an inspiration going forward unless we decide that it's a battle over values, the attack on what is woke, what is not woke, and what are real democratic values, what is real justice. So I think unless there's we're going to sort of philosophical crisis, in my opinion, this particular period, not only in India but in everywhere, all over the world. So unless some of these basic issues are sorted out, I think journalism will also remain in a sort of casualty. I'm not very sure that at this moment it's inspiring. It's in an inspiring state.
So next up. I have to definitely have your question. Yes, of course. I said definitely have Professor Zoya Hassan's question. But Sunita, quickly
just that, the most inspiring thing for people is what inspired me as well. You'll never have a boring day. You'll have lots to talk about.
Yeah. Professor Hassan, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. No, I just want to follow up on what Malini just said, because I think she has raised really the most critical question right now. I have just three comments. One, Mrs. K, talking about women in media, apart from all the personal issues and the personal challenges that all of you have talked about, I think, do women journalists approach political reporting differently from their male counterparts? If so, how does gender influence their perspective and coverage? Secondly, apropos the point that Sonia was making earlier in the discussion, which is that do women journalists respond differently than men to political pressures? And I think we are all aware that there are plenty of political pressures today. That is, do women respond differently than men to political pressures in the newsroom or in the field? And I think the interesting issue really is, are they more or less likely to conform to political pressures? Are they more likely to fall in line? And finally, apropos Malini's question, are women, because we have to face it that Indian media today is very different. And there is, as she rightly said, a credibility crisis. We can agree or disagree about why this is so, but surely I think what all of us who read the media, who watch the media, are aware that the media today is different from what it was even 10 years ago. And so I think the interesting question really is, are women journalists concerned about the turn that the Indian media has taken, which is not exactly unbiased? It is not always very professional, and it is currently very pro-government. So this is something which is different, which is not to say that in the past the media was not pro-government, but I think the scale, the nature, the scale is very different. So it would be very interesting to see whether women journalists, and we have such senior and accomplished, distinguished journalists in this panel, do women journalists approach it differently? Because what I sense is that very often the best of, whether it is in television or in print, the best of journalists, they do their best when they're doing at best two-sidism, rather than always speaking truth to power.
So difficult questions, but perhaps speaking now, I know. But I guess speaking as an ex-journalist, I think the biggest problem that journalism faces today is that as a public interest profession, in a sense, it's become a for-profit model. And I think that dichotomy is something which has never been so stark as it is today. And I think that you would, maybe in the decades gone, you would have a thing where a few journalists could get together and start something motivated by journalism. Now it's motivated by the question of profit, it's motivated by the question of protection, it's motivated by the question of influence. And I think until we find that, and one of the suggestions I've had when it's come up is that we almost need to have a media commission, which almost in a sense is a body like an election commission, where you're actually looking at how have we got here, what are the kind of rules of fair play, as it were. And I think without, and I think without that, which is it's something I want to develop on, but again the question arises that who would ever implement it? But I think that is the need of the hour for Indian media today, because until these fundamental questions are addressed, it's easy to say that somebody is pro-government or not, but if you see it happens in state across state, that rather than being anti-establishment, the media is now pro-establishment, whichever establishment it may be. Tomorrow, if there's another government in power, the media will be pro-them. I don't think you will find now the media doesn't see itself as adversarial anymore. I think that's been the biggest change. And where we can debate that for a long time, but unless we address the root cause of it, which is in many times revenue pressures you see across India, funding share dry up, stringers, reporters becoming stringers, working on contract, various things. Those are the key issues I think that faces journalism today. Yeah, and we end on that? Okay, sorry.
Thank you so much, Sonia. On behalf of India International Center, I would like to thank our esteemed panelists for the day today, starting from seniority. I'd like the director to felicitate all of you. I'll start from the senior most, Neerja ji. Thank you so much for this engaging conversation. And Malini ji, Sonia, you may stay where you are. There's no need. Thank you, Sunetra, for taking out time. Thank you, all of you. This was a very engaging conversation. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm really so happy after almost 3.5 years. 3.5 years.
What matches? It's a nice. It's a matches.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking forward to India.
And we can have a group photograph, all of you. Please oblige us with a group photograph. 6 of you together.
Seeing you after all. You call me?
He's a member, sir, but for the last 22 years he has not visited us.
They want a picture.
I will have a picture.
Don't worry. Please, you all.
Yeah.
Do you want to come?
All of us.
I think Neerja ji comes.
So there, okay.
Yeah.